Nazi engineers scoffed at U.S. Jeeps until they saw them crossing every battlefield. In the autumn of 1940, inside a secured briefing room at Wehrmacht High Command in Berlin, a group of German military engineers gathered around a table cluttered with intelligence photographs and reports from across the Atlantic. The images showed a peculiar American military vehicle, barely larger than a civilian car, with 4 exposed wheels, a flat hood, and an open frame that offered no armor protection whatsoever. The room erupted in laughter as senior officers examined what appeared to be a child's toy masquerading as a weapon of war. One colonel, a veteran of the Polish and French campaigns, declared that the Americans must be joking, suggesting that such a flimsy contraption belonged on a farm hauling vegetables, not on a battlefield facing the might of German armored divisions. These engineers, the same men who had designed the formidable Tiger tanks and sophisticated half-tracks that had conquered half of Europe, dismissed the American vehicle as evidence of industrial incompetence and strategic naivety. They returned to planning their next campaigns, confident that German engineering superiority would continue to dominate modern warfare. None of them, in their most pessimistic calculations, could have imagined that within 5 years, over 600,000 of these simple machines would roll across every battlefield in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific, becoming the most versatile and feared reconnaissance vehicle of the entire war. If stories like this captivate you, consider subscribing and tell us where you're watching from. It really helps us bring more stories like this your way. The contrast between German and American military philosophy became starkly visible in their approach to vehicle design during the late 1930s. German military doctrine emphasized specialized excellence, with each vehicle engineered for a specific purpose and built to the highest standards of precision manufacturing that German industry could achieve. Their armored vehicles featured thick steel plating, powerful engines, and sophisticated suspension systems that required teams of trained mechanics to maintain and repair. When German engineers examined the American vehicle's specifications in those early intelligence reports, they saw a machine that violated every principle they held sacred. It was light when it should have been heavy, simple when it should have been sophisticated, and mass-produced when it should have been precision-crafted. The American designers had started with a radical question that German engineers never thought to ask. What if the perfect military vehicle wasn't the one that performed best under ideal conditions, but the one that kept working under the worst conditions imaginable? The story of the American vehicle began not in a military laboratory, but in a desperate competition against time in the summer of 1940. The United States Army, watching Europe fall to German forces, issued an urgent requirement for a light reconnaissance vehicle that could be produced quickly in massive numbers. The specifications seemed impossible. The vehicle had to weigh less than 300 pounds, carry a crew of 3, transport equipment, mount weapons, and be capable of operating in any terrain or climate on Earth. American automobile companies Willys, Ford, and Bantam competed to deliver working prototypes within just 49 days, an impossibly short timeline that reflected the urgency of American military planners. Bantam's engineer Harold Christ designed the first prototype by stripping away everything that wasn't absolutely essential, creating a vehicle so simple that a manual transmission, basic electrical system, and rugged four-wheel drive formed its entire mechanical complexity. When Willys refined the design with a more powerful engine and Ford prepared its factories for mass production, they created a manufacturing system that could produce one complete vehicle every 2 minutes at peak operation. The American approach represented a fundamental philosophical break from European military thinking. German vehicles were engineering showcases where each component was precisely machined and each system optimized for maximum performance under controlled conditions. These magnificent machines worked beautifully when everything functioned perfectly, when skilled mechanics performed regular maintenance, when replacement parts arrived on schedule, and when fuel quality remained consistent. But war, as American designers understood, was the enemy of perfection. In actual combat, dustclogs' precise mechanisms, mudfowls' carefully calibrated systems, battle damage disables sophisticated components, freezing temperatures sees tight tolerances, and extreme heat warps precision parts. The American vehicle assumed imperfection from the beginning, designed not for what should happen in war, but for what would inevitably happen. Every component was overbuilt, understressed, and accessible to soldiers with basic mechanical knowledge. The engine design exemplified this philosophy of purposeful simplicity. Derived from civilian automotive technology proven over millions of miles of American highway use, the Willys engine produced modest power, but delivered legendary reliability under conditions that would destroy more sophisticated power plants. The four-cylinder configuration used widely available parts that could be manufactured by dozens of suppliers, ensuring that replacement components would always be available regardless of which factories survived enemy bombing. The transmission system was so mechanically simple that farmers with no automotive training could understand and repair it using tools already in their barns. The electrical system, waterproofed in ways that German vehicles never matched, allowed the vehicle to ford streams up to 30 inches deep without stalling, a capability that would prove decisive in countless river crossings from Normandy to the Philippines. Testing revealed capabilities that surprised even the American designers who had created the vehicle. Engineers discovered it could climb grades of 60 degrees that would challenge mountain infantry on foot, its low gear ratios and lightweight construction combining to provide mountain goat agility on terrain considered impassable to vehicles. With special modifications that could be installed in hours, the vehicle could operate on railroad tracks, steel wheels replacing rubber to pursue retreating forces along rail lines. Fitted with snow chains, it traversed Arctic conditions that stopped German-tracked vehicles, and equipped with sand tires, it crossed North African deserts where German supply columns bogged down in soft sand. The vehicle's versatility came not from sophisticated technology, but from deliberate simplicity that allowed endless field modifications by soldiers who had never seen an engineering blueprint. When the first American vehicles arrived in North Africa in late 1942, German commanders initially dismissed them as confirmation of American industrial inadequacy. Intelligence officers reported with amusement that the Americans were deploying unarmored vehicles that a single rifle bullet could disable, predicting that these flimsy machines would be destroyed within days of first contact. But the German assessment failed to account for the mathematics of mass production. While German factories struggled to produce a few hundred sophisticated vehicles per month, American production lines were manufacturing vehicles at a rate of 1 every 2 minutes, creating an industrial avalanche that would ultimately produce more military vehicles than Germany, Italy, and Japan combined. By the time German commanders recognized their error, American vehicles were appearing in such overwhelming numbers that destroying them became strategically meaningless. The transformation in German military assessment began during the Tunisia campaign in early 1943, when Wehrmacht officers started reporting disturbing observations about American tactical mobility. German units discovered that American forces seemed to appear simultaneously in multiple locations thought to be impossible to reach, conducting reconnaissance across hundreds of miles of front with a speed that German doctrine considered impossible. Captured documents revealed that a single American division operated more reconnaissance vehicles than an entire German army group, allowing American commanders to maintain complete battlefield awareness while German forces operated partially blind. The psychological impact proved as devastating as the tactical advantage, as German soldiers learned to associate the distinctive, high-pitched engine sound with impending attack. The vehicle's impact on Soviet forces fighting on the Eastern Front revealed the industrial dimension of American strategy. Through the Lend-Lease program, America shipped over 50,000 vehicles to the Soviet Union, where they transformed Red Army mobility in ways that shocked German Eastern commanders. Soviet forces that had been tied to railroads and primitive roads suddenly gained cross-country capability, appearing in German rear areas and threatening supply lines that had been considered secure. A captured German intelligence report from late 1943 betrayed growing alarm, noting that American vehicles seemed inexhaustible in number and that their presence usually indicated imminent offensive operations. The report recommended that Germany develop similar vehicles, but concluded it was impossible given the Reich's industrial constraints and existing commitments to producing tanks, aircraft, and submarines. The mathematics of industrial production created an insurmountable advantage that German planners struggled to comprehend. German factories, operating at maximum capacity, could produce perhaps 100 sophisticated military vehicles per month, each one requiring skilled labor and precision parts. American factories were producing that many vehicles in 3 hours, each one adequate for its purpose and requiring minimal skilled labor to manufacture. Worse still, from the German perspective, each German vehicle required extensive maintenance by trained specialists, while American vehicles could be maintained by anyone who could hold a wrench and driven by anyone who had operated a civilian automobile. The fuel consumption disparity compounded the crisis, as German vehicles consumed twice as much fuel in a war where synthetic fuel production was being systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. By the time of the Normandy invasion in June 1944, the presence of American vehicles had evolved into a psychological weapon that affected German morale as profoundly as any artillery barrage. German soldiers reported hearing the distinctive engine sound at night and knowing it meant they were being scouted for attack, that artillery observers were calling in coordinates, that infantry assaults would follow at dawn. The sound, higher pitched than German engines and almost cheerful in its mechanical efficiency, became associated with inevitable defeat. Veterans learned to distinguish it from the deeper growl of German vehicles at distances of half a mile or more, and that recognition brought dread rather than preparation because the vehicle's ability to appear anywhere, anytime, created a sense of paranoia that exhausted German units psychologically before combat even began. The Normandy breakout in August 1944 demonstrated the full operational impact of American vehicle superiority in a way that shattered remaining German confidence. As Allied forces burst through German defensive lines, thousands of American vehicles poured into the French countryside, moving faster than German commanders could track, and appearing in locations that staff maps showed as impossible to reach. German units attempting to establish defensive positions found American reconnaissance teams already present, calling in artillery that destroyed formations before they could organize. Retreating German columns discovered that American forces had somehow reached crossroads ahead of them, blocking escape routes and turning orderly withdrawals into chaotic routes. The speed of the American advance, enabled entirely by simple vehicles that German engineers had mocked 4 years earlier, exceeded even the pace of German blitzkrieg operations that had conquered France in 1940. One German officer wrote bitterly in his diary during the retreat across France that fighting Americans felt like fighting ghosts who were everywhere and nowhere, moving too fast to pin down, appearing in strength where least expected. He blamed it on their verdammte kleine Wagen, their damned little cars that seemed to multiply like insects. His diary, captured after his death near the German border, revealed the profound frustration of a professional soldier trained in traditional European warfare facing an enemy that didn't fight by the rules he understood. Where were the fixed positions that could be identified and attacked? Where was the proper order of battle that allowed rational planning? How could commanders develop operational strategy when the enemy might appear anywhere within hours? The American way of war, enabled by vehicles that cost less than a single German tank, was overturning decades of military doctrine. The final months of the war brought humiliation to German engineers who had laughed at American vehicle design in 1940. As Allied forces advanced into Germany itself, German soldiers began capturing and using American vehicles whenever possible, preferring them to their own military transport because of their reliability and the fact that fuel and parts were readily available from destroyed American columns. The irony was profound. Vehicles that German engineers had dismissed as toys became the most prized captured equipment of the entire war, with German units fighting each other for possession of abandoned American machines. Technical intelligence teams that examined captured vehicles reported with grudging respect that American engineers had achieved something German precision manufacturing never could, a vehicle that worked perfectly despite being imperfect in every component. The strategic lesson emerged with brutal clarity in the war's aftermath, though it arrived too late to save the Third Reich from the consequences of its industrial miscalculation. A captured Wehrmacht general, interviewed by American intelligence officers in 1945, admitted that German military leadership had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of modern industrial warfare. They had prepared to fight a war of tactical excellence and engineering superiority, believing that better designed weapons operated by better trained soldiers would overcome numerical disadvantages. They never comprehended that American strategy aimed not to build better vehicles, but to build so many adequate vehicles that German forces would drown in an ocean of mechanical mobility. The general's assessment, buried in classified files for decades, revealed that Germany lost the war not on battlefields, but in factories. Not through inferior courage, but through inferior production capacity. The legacy of those simple vehicles that German engineers mocked extends far beyond their immediate military impact during the war. They established principles of military design that continue to dominate doctrine worldwide, that reliability matters more than sophistication, that simplicity enables mass production, that adequate equipment in overwhelming numbers defeats excellent equipment in limited quantities. Modern military vehicles from every nation reflect these lessons, prioritizing maintenance accessibility and component interchangeability over maximum performance. The revolution in military logistics that enabled modern expeditionary warfare traces directly to American innovations in vehicle design and production that seemed primitive to German engineers but proved devastatingly effective in actual combat conditions. The story of how German engineers scoffed at American vehicles until 600,000 of them crossed every battlefield offers a timeless lesson about the danger of confusing sophistication with effectiveness, of mistaking complexity for capability. Those laughing German officers in 1940, surrounded by maps of their conquests and confident in their engineering supremacy, could not imagine that their mockery would become one of history's greatest strategic miscalculations. They brought precision craftsmanship to an industrial competition, expertise to a production contest, and quality to a quantity war. They learned, too late, that wars are won not by building the perfect weapon, but by building enough adequate weapons, not through engineering excellence, but through industrial capacity. The humble vehicles they dismissed carried Allied forces from North Africa to Berlin, proving that in warfare, as in life, the ability to adapt, to produce, and to persist often matters more than the ability to perfect. If this kind of storytelling inspires you, subscribe, leave a like, and tell us what topic you'd like to see next.